5. Zero-cost liquid fertilizers that can save a dying plant in 48 hours. Picture a tomato plant at the edge of a backyard. Its leaves have turned the color of old newspaper. The stems droop toward the ground like they have given up. The flowers that opened just last week have already closed for good. Most people see this and do the same thing. They reach for the shovel. They pull the plant out, toss it on the compost heap, and tell themselves there was nothing left to be done. But here is where the story takes a turn that changes everything. Soil scientists who study the exact moment a plant begins to collapse have found something remarkable. In almost every case, the plant is not finished. It is not dying of old age. It is not beyond saving. It is simply starving, running out of one or two specific nutrients that the soil around it can no longer provide. And those nutrients, every single one of them, can be delivered in as little as 48 hours using items already sitting inside the average kitchen. Now, think about this for a moment. Every single day, households around the world throw away the equivalent of 1 billion meals worth of food. In the United States alone, a family of 4 wastes roughly $2,913 worth of food every year. That is $56 a week dropped straight into the trash can. At the same time, the price of nitrogen fertilizer jumped 22% in just 1 year between 2025 and 2026. Urea prices at the New Orleans import hub spiked nearly 30% in a single week when global shipping routes were disrupted. A recent survey from the American Farm Bureau found that roughly 70% of farmers across the country said they could not afford all the fertilizer they needed this season. So, here is the contradiction that almost nobody talks about. The nutrients are not scarce. They never were. They are sitting right there in every kitchen in America, wrapped inside banana peels, buried under coffee filters, hiding in the cloudy water that gets poured down the drain after rinsing a pot of rice. The problem is not supply. The problem is direction. The nutrients are being routed to the landfill instead of the garden bed. 5 of them. 5 zero-cost liquid fertilizers that university soil labs have measured, that farming communities in the heartland have relied on for generations, and that the lawn and garden industry has quietly pushed aside for one very simple reason. There is no profit in a banana peel. There is no way to patent onion skin tea. There is no premium shelf space to sell something that comes free from a kitchen drawer. The blue crystals in the plastic bag can be stamped with a logo and sold for $9 a box. The amber liquid made from onion skins cannot. And that, more than any scientific argument, is the real reason these methods disappeared from mainstream gardening advice over the last 70 years. This is the story of those 5. What each one does inside the soil, why each one works faster than almost anything sold in a store, and the single mistake that nearly every home gardener makes that keeps these remedies from doing what they are supposed to do. If this is the kind of knowledge you have been looking for, the kind that turns what most people throw away into something that actually keeps a garden alive, then this channel was built for exactly that. Stay with me through all 5, because the last one is the oldest method on this list. Older than coffee, older than bananas on American grocery shelves, older than most of the houses in whatever town you are watching this from right now. Let us start with the one hiding in every kitchen trash can in America, the dry, papery skin that gets peeled off an onion and tossed away without a second thought. Here is a question worth asking before another onion skin gets dropped into the trash. Which part of the onion holds more potassium, more calcium, more magnesium, and more iron? Is it the white, fleshy bulb that goes into the soup, the part everyone considers the valuable piece? Or is it the dry, papery brown skin that gets peeled off and thrown away? The answer surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. It is the skin. Those brittle outer layers, the ones treated as garbage for as long as kitchens have existed, carry one of the most concentrated doses of essential plant minerals found anywhere in the produce aisle. A study published in the journal Agronomy in 2024 confirmed what a handful of old-time gardeners have known for generations. The peel of an onion contains significantly higher concentrations of proteins, phenolic compounds, flavonoids, and antioxidants than the edible flesh inside. The skin is not waste. It never was. But the minerals are only part of the story. Those outer layers also carry a compound called quercetin, the same compound found in red wine, apples, and blueberries that researchers have studied for its protective effects on the human heart. Inside a plant, quercetin does remarkably similar work. It shields leaves from the stress of harsh summer sun. It slows the spread of fungal infection. It steadies the internal chemistry of a plant when a heat wave rolls through or a cold snap drops the temperature overnight. Research published by Oxford Academic found that when quercetin breaks down on the surface of onion scales, it produces a substance called 3,4-dihydroxybenzoic acid, which acts as a natural antifungal agent. Separate studies tested quercetin-rich onion extracts against some of the most common garden killers, fungi like botrytis, cinerea, the grey mold that destroys strawberries and tomatoes, fusarium, which causes wilt from the roots up, and rhizoctonia, solani, the organism behind damping off disease that kills seedlings before they ever have a chance. The quercetin showed significant antifungal activity against all of them. The onion skin sitting in the garbage is not just a source of minerals, it is also carrying a natural plant defense system that most gardeners have never heard of. Now, here is where most gardeners make the wrong turn. They hear about onion peels and imagine burying the skin straight into the soil, expecting them to decompose and feed the roots. That method works, but it takes weeks. The nutrients stay locked inside the dry fibers, while the plant above continues to wilt. By the time the skins break down, the plant is already gone. The real trick is water. Water pulls compounds out of plant tissue the same way a tea bag releases flavor into a hot cup. A handful of dry onion skins, a quart jar, cool water from the tap. That is the entire setup. Within 24 hours, the water begins to darken. By the second day, it has turned the color of deep amber. That color is potassium, magnesium, calcium, iron, and quercetin compounds dissolving into the liquid. Once those minerals are in the water, they are in a form plant roots can absorb immediately. No composting required, no waiting for decomposition. Poured at the base of a yellowing tomato plant or around a pepper that has stopped setting fruit, this amber liquid begins to work within days. Stems thicken, new leaves come in a deeper green, flower production picks up within a week. And here is a detail most gardening books never mention. The plant's own immune response starts working harder. Stem rot slows down. Seedling wilt begins to fade. The plants that would have been pulled out by the weekend are instead still standing, still producing, at the end of the growing season. And here is the part nobody in the fertilizer business will say out loud. No company in North America can build a profitable business around onion peel tea. There is no way to package it, no patent to file, no shelf space to fight over. That is the real reason this method disappeared from mainstream advice. Not because the blue crystals work better, they do not. Onion peel tea feeds the plant directly. It delivers minerals straight to the roots in a form they can drink. But the next ingredient on this list does something completely different. It does not feed the plant at all. Instead, it feeds something far more important: the billions of microscopic workers living in the top inch of every garden bed. And that single difference changes everything about how plants grow. What if the cloudy water that gets poured down the kitchen drain every evening, the water left over after rinsing a pot of uncooked rice, turns out to be one of the most powerful soil treatments ever studied under a microscope? It sounds like an exaggeration. It is not. Washed rice water carries starches, B vitamins, and small amounts of iron and zinc. Fresh from the pot, it is already mildly useful to a garden, but the real transformation begins a few days later, after the water has been left at room temperature in a covered jar. The liquid takes on a faintly sour smell, like the first hint of sourdough starter or the early stages of yogurt. Most people would pour it out at that point. Doing so would mean throwing away the most valuable part of the entire process. That sour smell is the signature of a microbial bloom. Lactic acid bacteria and wild yeasts have moved into the liquid and taken over. This is where the research of a Japanese agricultural scientist named Teruo Higa becomes essential to the story. In the 1980s, working at the University of the Ryukyus in Okinawa, Higa introduced the concept of effective microorganisms. His work demonstrated that certain beneficial microbes, when introduced into depleted soil, could bring it back to productive life in a matter of weeks. Effective microorganism formulas are now used on farms in more than 150 countries around the world. And here is the detail that makes the whole picture click. The microbes at the heart of those formulas are the same ones that appear naturally in fermented rice water, for free, with no shipping cost and no subscription. A rigorous study published in the journal Sustainability confirmed this with hard numbers. Researchers found that washed rice water contains on average 81 milligrams per liter of nitrogen, 65 of phosphorus, 131 of potassium, 24 of calcium, and 25 of magnesium. After just 3 days of fermentation, the concentration of most of these nutrients increased by 7 to 57%. The fermentation process promoted the growth of bacteria capable of fixing nitrogen from the air, solubilizing phosphorus locked in the soil, and breaking down potassium into forms that roots can absorb. Researchers also detected indole-3 acetic acid in the fermented water, a natural plant hormone that directly stimulates root growth. In a field trial conducted over 3 full planting cycles, soil treated with fermented rice water consistently had the highest bacterial population of any treatment group. The soil that received only synthetic fertilizer had a bacterial count lower than even the untreated control. The chemical fertilizer fed the plant, but starved the soil. The rice water fed the soil and let the soil feed the plant. Here is the way to understand the difference. Handing someone a single meal keeps them alive for a day. Handing them a working kitchen keeps them fed for a lifetime. Fresh rice water is the single meal. Fermented rice water is the working kitchen. Now the common mistake that trips up nearly every first-timer. Most gardeners pour the rice water on fresh, straight from rinsing, and expect miracles. Fresh rice water is mild. It does very little. Fermented rice water, 3 to 5 days old, is an entirely different tool. The smell is the signal. If the liquid does not carry that faint sour tang, it is not ready. And there is a dilution rule that matters. Fermented rice water should be mixed at roughly 1 part rice water to 10 parts clean water before it touches the soil. Undiluted, the acidity is strong enough to irritate tender roots, especially in young seedlings. Rice water wakes up the life of the soil, but a plant that is already collapsing today does not have time to wait for the soil to rebuild itself. That plant needs food it can drink before the sun goes down, which is exactly why the next method exists. Every refrigerator in America has one. The forgotten tomato sitting at the bottom of the crisper drawer, its skin wrinkled and soft. The head of lettuce that wilted before anyone got around to making a salad. The bruised cucumber pushed behind the milk carton. For most households, these scraps end up in the trash, or at best, in a compost bin that will not produce anything usable for months. But for a gardener who knows the method, that pile of forgotten vegetables is the fastest acting nitrogen source that can be made at home. In the 1840s, a German chemist named Justus von Liebig proved something that changed the way farmers thought about plant growth. He showed that a plant does not grow according to the nutrients it has plenty of. It grows according to the one nutrient it has the least of. This became the law of the minimum. Picture a wooden barrel with staves of different heights. Water only rises as high as the shortest stave. It does not matter how tall the rest are. Plants work the same way. If a tomato has generous potassium and plenty of phosphorus, but not quite enough nitrogen, its growth stops at the nitrogen line. And nitrogen in nearly every backyard garden in America is the single most common missing stave. This is where the kitchen scraps become something extraordinary. Green vegetable waste carries what soil scientists call a low carbon to nitrogen ratio. In plain language, that means these scraps are packed with nitrogen compared to their fiber content. Overripe tomatoes, soft bell peppers, wilted spinach, bruised kale, mushy cucumbers, all of them are nitrogen hiding in plain sight. And a study published in the journal Sustainability in 2023 confirms something that makes this even more compelling. Researchers found that kitchen waste, when properly processed, performed as a better fertilizer than standard mineral fertilizer, producing 20 to 40% higher plant yields at application rates above 120 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. Separate research found that bacteria can break down food scraps in water and produce a clear, nutrient-dense liquid fertilizer within just 24 to 72 hours. That is not weeks. That is not months. That is days, sometimes less. The method itself is as simple as anything on this list. Collect the vegetable scraps that would normally go to the trash. Soft tomatoes, wilted greens, overripe peppers, bruised fruit, anything from the produce drawer that is past its prime. Drop them into a 5-gallon bucket. Cover them with water. Press a plate or a heavy lid down on top to keep the scraps submerged beneath the surface. Then leave it alone. Over the next 2 weeks, something remarkable happens beneath that lid. Bacteria in the water go to work, breaking the plant cells apart. The nitrogen locked inside the tissue of those vegetables gets released and pulled into the surrounding liquid. The process has a scientific name, nitrogen mineralization, and in water, it happens dramatically faster than it would in a dry compost pile sitting in the corner of the yard. The finished liquid is not pretty. It is dark, cloudy, and strong smelling. That smell is the proof it is ready. Any gardener who has ever walked past a working compost tea barrel in late July knows exactly what that scent is. Earthy, pungent, unmistakable, and full of promise. Diluted at roughly 1 part scrap liquid to 30 parts fresh water, this digestate goes straight onto the soil at the base of the plant. Not on the leaves. Never on the leaves. Only at the root zone. Within 4 to 6 days, the change is visible in a way that feels almost impossible. Pale, tired leaves deepen to full shades of green. New shoots push out from the leaf joints where nothing was forming before. Stems thicken near the base. A plant that looked completely finished on Monday is setting fresh flowers by Saturday. That is not an exaggeration. That is nitrogen doing what nitrogen does when it finally reaches a starving plant in a form it can actually absorb. Now, the critical mistake, and this one is important because it burns more gardens every summer than any other error on this entire list. Many gardeners, excited by the early results, either spray the liquid directly onto the leaves as a foliar treatment or pour it on at full strength without diluting. Both of these are a disaster waiting to happen. The liquid at full concentration is strong enough to scorch leaves on contact, leaving brown, burned patches that will not recover. Poured undiluted onto the soil, it can destroy the fine root hairs that do most of the actual nutrient absorption, and once those are gone, the plant is in worse shape than before. This method works beautifully at the correct dilution, applied to the soil, at the root zone, and never stronger than the 1:30 ratio. Here is a quiet truth that is worth sitting with for a moment, because most home gardeners have never thought about it this way. The average American kitchen produces more nitrogen in a single week of vegetable scraps than a small backyard garden actually needs in an entire month. The nutrients were never scarce. They were always there, wrapped inside the lettuce leaves and tomato skins and pepper cores, flowing out the door in a plastic trash bag twice a week. A gardener who redirects even half of that waste stream back toward the soil will, within a single growing season, stop needing to buy nitrogen fertilizer altogether. The supply was always there. It just needed a different destination. Nitrogen solves the hunger problem. It addresses the most common deficiency in the most direct way possible. But here is the reality that makes the next method essential. Most plants that are visibly struggling are not missing just one nutrient. They are missing 5 or 6 at the same time in different amounts, all pulling the plant down from different directions at once. For that kind of emergency, a single ingredient is not enough. The garden needs a full recipe. And that recipe, it turns out, can be assembled entirely from items that most American households throw away before breakfast. What if there were one single mixture built entirely from items most households throw away before breakfast that covered almost all of those deficiencies at once? That mixture exists. It comes together like a recipe, with each ingredient playing a specific and irreplaceable role. And understanding what each one actually does inside the soil is the difference between a half-working tonic and a tonic that can rescue a plant overnight. Banana peels provide potassium, the mineral that drives flowering and fruiting. A tomato short on potassium produces small watery fruits with skins that split. Crushed eggshells provide calcium carbonate, the building block of cell walls. Calcium deficiency is the hidden cause behind blossom end rot, that black sunken patch at the bottom of an otherwise beautiful tomato. Used coffee grounds add slow-release nitrogen and improve soil texture. Now here is a myth worth correcting, because it has been circulating for decades. Used coffee grounds do not make soil acidic. University soil labs consistently measure used grounds between 6.5 and 6.8 on the pH scale, nearly neutral. They add organic matter, attract earthworms, and improve drainage. Useful, just not for the reason most people think. 2 more ingredients take this recipe from good to exceptional. Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate, delivers magnesium, the mineral sitting at the center of every chlorophyll molecule in every green leaf on Earth. No magnesium, no chlorophyll, no photosynthesis. When magnesium runs low, leaves yellow between the veins while the veins themselves stay green. 1 tablespoon dissolved in the brew can reverse this within days. But a warning belongs here. Yellowing leaves have many causes. Nitrogen deficiency yellows the older leaves first. Iron deficiency yellows the youngest. Overwatering yellows the whole plant. Epsom salt fixes magnesium deficiency specifically. When the cause is something else, adding more Epsom salt does very little and can throw the soil's nutrient balance off. Diagnose before treating. The final ingredient is blackstrap molasses. Not regular table molasses, not the light amber kind used in holiday baking, but blackstrap, the dark, almost bitter final product that comes from the last boiling of sugarcane. Blackstrap is rich in iron and trace minerals, but its real role in this formula is something entirely different, something that almost no gardening resource explains correctly. Molasses is food for microbes. 1 tablespoon of blackstrap stirred into the gallon jug of this brew is like ringing a dinner bell for every beneficial bacterium in the liquid. Their populations multiply within hours, not days, hours. And those hyperactive microbes then go to work, breaking down the banana peels, the eggshells, and the coffee grounds far faster than those ingredients would ever decompose on their own. A brew made without molasses takes roughly 3 weeks before it is truly useful. A brew made with molasses can be ready in 3 days. That single tablespoon is the difference between a slow drip fertilizer and an instant rescue. All of these ingredients go into about 1 gallon of warm water and steep for 3 to 5 days in a covered bucket. The result is a full-spectrum tonic carrying potassium, calcium, nitrogen, magnesium, iron, trace minerals, and a live culture of working bacteria, all in a single pour. The most common mistake is the simplest one: skipping the molasses. That 1 tablespoon is the engine that makes the whole formula work at rescue speed. This recipe covers the modern kitchen from top to bottom, but there is one more method on this list, and it is older than any of these ingredients. Older than coffee on the American breakfast table, older than bananas in the grocery store, older than most of the houses standing in any town where this video is playing. A method used by every civilization that ever grew its own food. Before 1913, synthetic fertilizer did not exist. Not in a bag, not in a box, not on a single shelf anywhere on Earth. Every farm on the planet, from the rolling fields of Iowa to the green pastures of Ireland to the terraced hillsides of India, ran on the same two inputs: animal, manure, and compost. That was the entire system, and it worked for thousands of years. Then two German scientists changed the course of human history. Fritz Haber, a chemist, and Carl Bosch, an engineer, invented a process that could pull nitrogen directly out of thin air and convert it into ammonia. That invention, now known as the Haber-Bosch process, is often credited with making it possible to feed half the human population alive on Earth today. It was, by almost any measure, one of the most important scientific breakthroughs of the 20th century. But there is a second half to that story, a half that rarely appears in gardening books or on the back of any fertilizer bag, and it is a half that matters enormously to anyone who cares about what is actually happening underneath their garden. Over the past 100 years, the widespread use of synthetic nitrogen did exactly what it promised. It fed billions of people. But it also did something else, something quieter, something that accumulated slowly over decades until the consequences became visible from space. Research from the Union of Concerned Scientists documented that excessive synthetic nitrogen runoff from farmland across the American Midwest is a primary contributor to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, costing an estimated $2.4 billion in lost livelihoods for fishing communities along the coast. High doses of synthetic nitrogen acidify soils and disrupt the microbial communities that make nutrients naturally available to plants. The United Nations Environment Programme reported that human activity now produces more reactive nitrogen than all natural processes on Earth combined, with 200 million tons lost to the environment each year. Synthetic nitrogen fed billions. It also taught a generation of farmers to feed the plant while slowly starving the soil beneath it. For a home gardener, the old method still works, and for rescuing a dying plant, it still outperforms the synthetic version in one critical way. It delivers nutrients and living biology at the same time. The method is called manure tea. Among old-time farmers in the Appalachian Hills, they call it the giant tea bag. A shovelful of aged dried manure from chickens, cows, or rabbits goes into a porous sack. An old cotton pillowcase works perfectly. So does a burlap feed bag or a mesh laundry sack, tied shut at the top and dropped into a 5-gallon bucket of water for 3 to 5 days. The water slowly extracts nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and trace minerals, while solid matter stays safely inside the sack. Each type of manure brings a different profile, and choosing the right one matters. Aged chicken manure carries the highest nitrogen and phosphorus, making it the most powerful growth stimulant. A single cup of properly diluted chicken manure tea can push a fading tomato back into heavy flowering within a week. Cow manure is more balanced, exceptional for building long-term soil structure. And rabbit manure is the quiet secret of experienced gardeners, the only common manure that can be used raw without burning roots. The safest choice for young seedlings. Now the mistake that destroys more manure tea gardens than any other: using fresh manure. Fresh droppings carry too much ammonia, weed seeds, and potentially harmful organisms. A single bucket of fresh manure, applied too generously, can scorch an entire row of seedlings within 48 hours. The manure must be aged, ideally 6 months to a full year. No shortcuts on this step. Dilute the finished tea to the color of weak iced tea, roughly 1 part to 10 parts clean water. That ratio is not a rough suggestion. It is the dividing line between a tonic that heals and a tonic that burns. Applied at the correct strength, just 1 cup poured at the root zone of a struggling tomato can sustain that plant for a full week, sometimes longer. And there is one more detail worth knowing, because old-time farmers have sworn by it for generations, and modern soil science now confirms they were right all along. Manure tea is most effective when applied during the cool hours of the day, either early in the morning or in the last hour before sunset. In the heat of midday, much of the nitrogen in the liquid evaporates into the air before the roots ever get a chance to absorb it. In the cool of evening, the soil holds on to those nutrients, and the plant drinks at its own pace through the quiet hours of the night. The result is a fertilizer that combines every essential nutrient a plant needs with the living microorganisms that help the plant actually use those nutrients. It is not just food. It is the entire ecosystem delivered in a single bucket. And it costs nothing beyond what the animals have already provided for free. 5 fertilizers, 5 methods, every one of them already sitting in the kitchen, the garden, or the shed. 5 fertilizers, 5 methods, every single one already sitting in the kitchen, the garden shed, or the refrigerator. Onion peel tea for potassium, calcium, magnesium, iron, and natural antifungal protection. Fermented rice water to rebuild the invisible army of beneficial microbes that make soil nutrients available. Vegetable scrap digestate for the fastest nitrogen boost a home gardener can make. The full-spectrum kitchen brew to cover nearly every deficiency in a single pour. And aged manure tea, the oldest method known to agriculture, delivering the complete ecosystem the way farming worked for every civilization on Earth before 1913. Each one begins to work within a week. Some show visible results in as little as 2 days. And not a single one of them will ever cost you $1. Now, here is the thread that ties all 5 together, and it is worth understanding because it changes the way you look at your kitchen from this day forward. The things that modern life has taught us to call waste, the onion skins, the rice water, the wilted lettuce, the coffee grounds, the eggshells, the banana peels, are in almost every case the exact inputs that a struggling garden needs to come back to life. They are not garbage. They never were. They are plant food that has been mislabeled, misunderstood, and misdirected for the better part of a century. Somewhere along the way, an industry figured out that there was no money in teaching people to use what they already had, and a great deal of money in convincing them to buy something new instead. The blue crystals won the shelf space. The onion peels lost the narrative. But the science never changed. Consider the numbers one more time. 70% of American farmers cannot afford enough fertilizer this season. Urea prices surged 30% in a single week when a shipping route on the other side of the world is disrupted. Meanwhile, American households throw away $2,913 of food every year, food filled with the exact minerals and nitrogen compounds that gardens are starving for. The nutrients are not missing from the system. They are just traveling in the wrong direction. Every kitchen that learns to turn its scraps back toward the soil is one small correction in that flow. One household at a time, one garden bed at a time, one bucket of onion peel tea at a time. The gardener who understands this has something that no price increase can take away, and no supply chain disruption can threaten. A source of fertilizer that will never run out, that will never raise its price, that will never need to be shipped across an ocean or held hostage by a trade dispute, or stamped with an expiration date. The garden asks only one thing in return, that its keeper pay attention, that they remember how the old methods worked, that they watch the leaves, read the soil, and trust the process that kept food growing on this earth for thousands of years before anyone ever thought to put plant food in a plastic bag. So the next time a tomato plant starts to yellow, or a pepper stops setting fruit, or a proud old zucchini that has been producing all summer long begins to fade and droop toward the ground, pause before reaching for the shovel. The cure is very likely already sitting in the kitchen, waiting to be used instead of thrown away. If any of these 5 methods spoke to you, leave a note below about which one you plan to try first. Share this video with a fellow gardener who has been losing more plants than they have been saving this season. And if